Hello, everybody. Let's talk about creative visualization for better memory and get a real handle on what actually really works when it comes to visualization. Let's talk about the law of attraction, which really inspired this. And, we want to be quite humorous and light about this, but I think there's some things to be said about that because I know a lot of people, they go and they use hypnotic trainings for memory and for visualization. And there's a problem with those kinds of things. And it's the same problem that people have when they're using visualization for things like law of attraction. And so this came to my attention on one of our live streams about visualization exercises, the replay. And I was just sort of asking about particular commenters' problems with visualization, and it came out that it had to do with law of attraction visualization that may have brought him to the video. And I basically was asking a little bit about it, and it came down to the question, do your visualizations actually have to be clear? And Randall says, yes, they do. Visualization of having what you desire already, as if it already happened, to get you to the emotion you feel now that you have it. It's been difficult for me because I'm having trouble visualizing. And this is a very, very important thing because that's not what the law of attraction is when it's taught well, and we're going to debunk it because it's never taught well, and there's a way to think of it better because there is something to this idea, and it's a fantasy that people put together, and they ignore the actual thing that would work to attract what it is that they want in life. So we're going to talk about that as it relates to just success in life in general, but also how it relates to memory, because it's what do you want success for other than to have a better memory of the life that you lived when you look back and see that road and say, well, that was a good one, instead of, oh, I wasted my time and nothing happened. This is very, very much a memory issue in every single way. So Crone Woman Walking is here, says, I love this. Law of attraction people like Abraham Hinks want to exert no effort with $1 million results. Yeah, there's actually an interesting Abraham Hicks conversation recording I heard one time where she basically tries to explain something that I'm going to explain today and doesn't manage to do so because she's so buried in her own BS that it just doesn't come through. And so we'll be able to I hope, help people who want this sort of help. But the key point here is that there's a definite link between the visualization we do for memorizing information and what we do to just visualize, period, especially when it comes to what we want in life. And so there's a link to this replay where this discussion is happening. You can read it, get involved if you like, and watch the visualization exercises replay, which many people have found useful. There's also just a polished podcast version and blog post version as well on magneticmarymethod.com. And I'll have to add that link to the description below later. But this is a real critical and key issue, and one that I think is going to help you a lot if you really pay attention to this and pay it its due and put it into action, because ultimately that's why law of attraction is so bad for so many people. And visualization, I'm not going to name a lot of these programs. You probably know some of them anyway, but they will teach you how to visualize for better memory. And it's really, really impossible because it's leading you into inaction when what you need to do is something quite different. So we'll talk about that as we go through today's presentation. If you're joining us, hit the thumbs up. Let me know where you are in the world, what you're doing, what you're thinking. And it's not just this discussion that inspired this, but I ran a survey the other day, yesterday actually, and really appreciate all the votes that came in. We got 92 votes so far on the YouTube community tab. So what I was asking about there is what you prefer for live stream sessions. And so 53% said more memory science. And this is memory science, what we're doing here. We're tackling pseudoscience today. And I think it's one of the more important things that we can do, but we will get to more science in the near future. Brad is here from Seattle. Hello, Brad. Thanks for saying hello. Good to see you. By the way, I think our Facebook audience is down today. There's some optimization of the internet going on, and the API or whatever it's called is not hooked up properly, and I stopped fiddling with it because it was getting annoying. But in any case, sorry to lose those people because it was starting to get interesting, and hopefully they won't optimize the internet into network television anytime soon, so we can continue to have fun. But back to this survey, more brain science was 13%, more memory history 4%, more critical thinking 24%, and some people left some other suggestions. Now, what I find very interesting about this is then we cross-index the survey results against how people actually behave. But if you answered that survey on the community tab, thank you very much. I really appreciate that. It helps guide this. And this is, even if it doesn't sound like memory science, this is memory science. It's just we're going to tackle some pseudoscience that just happen to be in the works. So if you're joining us, hit that thumbs up. Let me know where you are in the world, what you're doing, what you're thinking, and we will motor on. So what is this law of attraction stuff anyway? Now, I encountered it many, many years ago. I don't actually have a copy of Why People Believe Weird Things, but I do have Skeptic here by Michael Shermer, who also wrote Why People Believe Weird Things. I was very, very lucky to take a course in pseudoscience at university, and that was in anthropology, and wow, what a great course. I'm so lucky that I had that course. It's helped with a lot of memory too, because you can see through a lot of bad ideas when you have skepticism, when you have critical thinking. And Brad says he's met Michael Shermer in person. Awesome. That's amazing. I'd love to meet him too. I'd love to thank him because it was years and years and years ago that I took this course in anthropology where we did pseudoscience, the anthropology essentially of science versus pseudoscience. And he's been a big influence in my life ever since. And yeah, there's that. We'll talk about some other skeptics as well, but I lay my cards on the table that I have a very open mind, but it's not so open that my brains fall out, even though sometimes they do. And certain experiences I've had certainly call certain things into question where you're just like, well, how is that possible if X and Y and Z is not true? So that's very important. Maricella is in the house. Thanks for being here, Maricella. Thank you for your comments on the survey that we launched, and look forward to doing a little bit more critical thinking because that had 24% interest from you all. And I'm very interested in whether numbers games like this actually pan out, so we'll see. Bracket asks, is meditation helpful to remember things directly? That's a good way to ask it. I want to give you a compliment for asking it that way. Is it helpful to remember things directly? Very good. So there's a nuanced answer to this, and let's get into it. So basically, meditation is known to improve general memory. One of the reasons why is because it helps you pay more attention to the present moment. So you're just going to naturally remember things more because you're actually paying attention to it in the first place. You are present, as they say. You're more present. And the more present you are, the more you're going to notice details, and the more the details are actually going to sink in. Now, is it going to help you memorize things directly? As in, do you have to use, or can you skip over using memory techniques? I don't think so. See, you can train your mind to be much more focused and in the present moment and very, very aware of what's going on and have more input and more memory because of an increased input. But that's not the same as actually being able to catch things like someone's name and then actually hold on to it and encode it in such a way that it has the chance to transport from short-term memory into long-term memory as quickly as possible. That's done through mnemonics. That's done through elaborative encoding, right? And so elaborative encoding almost de facto automatically involves some sort of mnemonics. But here's the beautiful thing. The more you meditate, the more you'll actually remember to use mnemonics because you'll be paying attention more to those everyday situations and how your mind is wandering, and you'll rein it in and actually use them. And in my forthcoming book, I talk about how the memorization of names is one of the most strangely present thing that you can do. You are so locked on with the people as you're memorizing the names, like 20, 30, whatever amount of names, and you just are there. You're so in the zone. It's an incredible feeling. And it's the same thing when you study and you use memory techniques. You do elaborative encoding as you go along, and then you revisit and do some more intensive encoding, and you do your decoding. You're much more with the information, and you just get a natural lift. Or you can read, a little less actively, but will you actually remember more because of meditation? I'm not so sure. I think you'll pay attention to the text more. I mean, mind wandering is natural and normal, but it happens a lot less. And I'm reading a pretty heavy lifting text right now, which is Ong's book on Ramas. And there's a lot of, huge words in it and vocabulary I've never seen before in my life. And also some vocabulary I have seen before, but I haven't been reading so many scholarly books lately. But this is a great return to scholarly books, like heavy-duty scholarly books, and it's well written. Don't mean to say it's badly written, but it's intense, it's heavy. So I'm not getting some special memory advantage because I meditate. It's when I want to memorize something, I memorize it. And one vocabulary word that came out is lucubration, which is like studying late at night, something students shouldn't do. And that is going to appear on the channel very soon in a very special way. You might just say that the evil Dr. Forget tried to make me forget it, but I persisted and managed to memorize it anyway. All right, if you're just joining us, hit the thumbs up. Let me know where you are in the world, what you're doing, what you're thinking. Let me know if you have more questions around that, bracket hackers, and let's see why that we need to debunk this idea of law of attraction. So the idea of the law of attraction is generally, obviously people can add more in the chat or in the comments below the replay in the discussion area if you want. But the idea generally is that thoughts are made of shapeable, directable energy. So it's not just that you can shape energy from your thoughts. It's also that you can actually direct it in particular ways. Mental energy, right? And you can do this in order to, apparently, this is the claim, allegedly, attract wealth, attract health, attract better relationships. Now, one of the reasons why this is such a attractive idea, so to speak, is because we really can do things with our minds that gets us wealth, that gets us health, and that gets us relationships. You don't need some fantasy law of attraction in order for that to happen. We'll talk about that later, but it's like incredibly interesting to us because obviously thought can create these outcomes. But can you somehow, by thinking thoughts in a particular way, stack the chips in your favor? Well, yes, you maybe can. But can you because that there is a universal law? I don't know. I don't know. I don't know it so much I have to say it 3 times. This idea of the law of attraction is considered a universal law, and essentially, and this is something that came up in the comments that I shared with you before, you want to feel the outcome that you want, right? Well, feeling is indeed part of visualization, that's for sure. It is one of the modes, one of the representation centers in the brain. We don't really understand nearly enough about how the brain represents this, that, and the other thing, and where, but it seems to be that there are areas where this happens. And feeling is part of mental imagery for sure. You don't have to see pictures. You can feel things, and that feeling is sometimes called a mental image. Stephen Kosslyn talks about this in The Case for Mental Imagery, which is a book I highly recommend to all people. So you use creative visualization to help yourself feel outcomes that haven't happened yet, but you feel them as if they're already there. And this is somehow going to create resonance with a universal purpose. And, that's problematic because if there is a universal purpose out there, then that suggests that the universe is conscious. But we don't know. We don't have that sense. I pluck around and play around with things like Advaita Vedanta and so forth. None of that stuff and amazing, weird, wild experiences that I've had in any way demonstrates that the universe is conscious, even though a lot of the texts speak about it that way. And one of the problems with all of that is that if the universe was conscious, why would it create so much skepticism in me when I'm doing all the stuff, feeling all the great things that they say you're going to feel if you just sit down and do the meditation work and chant the chants and all that stuff? Why does it make me even more skeptical? Why does it accelerate what is essentially a pretty, knockhammer atheism, right? It's not really atheism. I'm more like a non-astrologist in that sense, but in any case, it's really, really strange. So if there's a universal purpose, why would it manifest a guy like me who's just gonna, feel really great about being skeptical about this universal purpose? It's really, really strange that would happen, right? Because if there was a universal consciousness, it would have weeded us out, except for the skeptics are getting stronger, and the science and the math is getting stronger and stronger. Tony Stark might have something to do with it. In any case, let's check in with the chat. Crone Woman Walking says, I study late. My brain shuts off at 3 a.m. With green tea or coffee, I can get 2 more hours of study. Oh, well, please don't stay up too late. You're referring to lucubration. Remember that word. It's an awesome word. Harvinder is in the Memory Palace. Good to see you, Harvinder. Thanks for being here. Always good to see you. Brad says, I would say at the edge of science, we are always looking at magic, essentially. Yeah, look, if we want to use that understanding of a sufficiently advanced technology being indistinguishable from magic, sure, we can. But this is just word games. This is just playing with words. I appreciate that, Brad. But when we really think about it, like, what do we gain by saying we're looking at magic, essentially? We're really not looking at magic at the end of the day, because if it was sufficiently advanced enough to be indistinguishable from magic, that advancement in our knowledge of its advancement would know that we know how we did it, and we would have a genealogy and a history of how we got there. So I think that there's a real end to as great as that statement is, there's a real end to it, and that end is very, very important. Harvinder says, just to confirm, I have reached 100 dream palaces. Wow. Amazing, Harvinder. I'm going to clap quietly so it doesn't burn out anybody's eardrums, but congratulations to you. Thumbs up for Harvinder. Really appreciate the update. And what Harvinder is referring to, in case you don't know, is a long time ago now, we did a month-long dream recall intensive. And one of the goals of the dream recall intensive was to associate from the material of your dreams to memory palaces, or just turn your dreams into memory palaces. He's up to 100 now. That's amazing. So I see Crow Woman Walking has put in her congrats with a little martini glass. Awesome. I'm a teetotaler now, but I can appreciate a reference to alcohol now and then. And Bracket Hacker says, magic might be the engineering technique which is not known to most of us. Okay, yeah, I mean, look, you can call it magic if you like, but I think that you get the point of why I'm putting some boundary on that statement. One of the things that we do, and I know Maricela was very interested in critical thinking, and 24% of people said they were interested in critical thinking in the recent survey. Maybe now more have answered, and it's higher. The thing is that we need to be critical of these things that seem meaningful, but they really aren't. So Maricela, there's a example for you. You see a phrase, you know that phrase has an origin, and it's lauded because of its origin, and it's really, really appreciated because of who it came from and so forth. But when you really think critically about it, you're like, yeah, how meaningful is that really? And when you poke into it, not to be a nihilist, but just to be like, look, what is that meaning? What does that mean? That's what critical thinking is all about. Does it really mean? Does it really hold up? And then you test it, and then you tweak it, like Bracket Hackers is. And so just because something's not known to us doesn't mean it's magic, but you can have a magical feeling about it for sure. But magic really, at the end of the day, in our contemporary setting, has a particular meaning, and it's sleight of hand. It's illusion. It's what technology does is never going to be distinguishable from magic, because by virtue of us knowing that it's technology, it's going to be technology. So why dance around and play language games unless you reading Wittgenstein or something like that, which is a lot of fun. All right. Brad says, we need guys like you. Well, thank you for the kind words. We need people like you as well. So keep on keeping on and showing up and joining us. And let's carry on. So, yes, this is what is said here. Again, this is just a little loose presentation of what law of attraction is about. You are welcome to put in your own ideas about what it might be, and either now or in the discussion beneath this video. But one of the huge problems with it is that there's a real positive-negative binary going on. It's like there are positive thoughts and there are negative thoughts, and if we have our negative thoughts, then that's going to lead to negative outcomes, and if we have our positive thoughts, that's going to lead to positive outcomes. Whoa. Not necessarily so. This totally doesn't jive with, for example, Aristotle's golden mean, right? Where he uses binaries also, but he's trying to get you to a center point and essentially escape the binary, escape that off-on black and white thinking by the middle way, right? So this is one of the biggest things I think that really puts the nail in the coffin of this law of attraction idea, is that it's so focused on positive versus negative. And that's really not the greatest thing. And one of the reasons why is because you actually need to be able to visualize all the things that could go wrong in order to effectively create protective measures around your progress. Because if you're just head in the clouds, oh, well, nothing ever is going to go wrong here, and you have never visualized things that could go wrong and put protective measures in place, you bought your destruction when it comes, and things will challenge your success. And there's so many people who just have their heads lost in the clouds, and they are not taking the time to actually play through potential counter positive things. And it's very, very important to do so. Very important to do so. So if we're going to visualize, one of the things that we want to do is actually have a expansive inclusion of the yes, no, maybe so, good, bad, mediocre. And one of the problems is, especially when it's taught in business and also in learning, because I've listened to many of these recordings where people are like, just visualize yourself remembering better and learning better and all that sort of stuff. One of the problems with all that jazz is that they are really forgetting about the fact that when things are boring, they're often very stable and good, quote unquote boring, right? So there's a saying, when business is boring, business is good. It's just humdrum, everyday sort of stuff. That's a good thing, right? It's when things are changing and disruptive and you have to scramble to keep up. Likewise with studying. If you just have a great technique, you're consuming all that you need, you're remembering more than enough, you're passing the exams, or in your language learning, you are just, getting enough vocabulary and phrases and meeting with your speaking partner and, you're having progress. Well, there's going to be boredom in there, right? So it's not a positive or a negative. It's actually like, where is the spot where we are sufficiently challenged? And we'll talk about that more in a little bit, but where we're sufficiently challenged, but we're not, frustrated, but there's going to be some kind of plateauing. There's going to be some kind of boredom in there. So it's not a positive negative. And if you're just focused on the positive, and one of the problems with the law of attraction is it makes people addicted to positive thinking that is actually contrary to their progress. You don't want to have any need or reliance or attachment to positivity, because that just ain't the way the world's built. And it ain't ever going to be that way, as far as we can see, unless they put implants into our brains that somehow cause an ability to neglect reality, which we don't really want, because that is going to turn us into drones that are serving the purpose of probably people who are not patched into the machines, because the elite almost certainly will not take on the risk of having electrodes in their brains. This is my prediction. Could be wrong. But if Elon Musk is the first person to hook up for Neuralink, I'll be very impressed indeed. All right, let's check in with our chat. Bracket Hacker says, yes, sir, I would like to know about the techniques which are helpful in visualizing images while reading text, because they're not coming naturally to me. All right, we can chat about that a little bit. Jennifer is in the house, says visualizing is the act of critical thinking. Yeah, I could definitely go with that. It's part of Critical thinking is definitely visualization. Thanks for that, and thanks for saying hello from the Philippines. Appreciate that. If you're joining us, hit the thumbs up. Let me know where you are in the world, what you're doing, what you're thinking. Matthew Snow says, look at the Fire Festival documentary. That's what happens when you try to dismiss negative thoughts. Thank you for that, Matthew. That will be something to look up. Fire Festival documentary. All right. Thank you. I really appreciate that. Love Music is in the house. Good to see you. Thank you for being here. If you're just joining us, hit the thumbs up. Let me know in the chat where you're coming from, what you're doing, what you're thinking, how you're feeling. And we're talking about basically memory pseudoscience and how it relates to our learning goals and this law of attraction stuff. And we are debunking it left, right, and center. And so far, I haven't seen anyone defending law of attraction. So, if you have a defense, please don't be silent. Don't be in the silent majority that just sits there and doesn't, combat back, so to speak. We don't have to be combative, but if you have evidence that it works or feelings that it does, let's chat about it. All right. Matthew Snow says, I was just thinking about Neuralink. Did you see the episode of Black Mirror where they used implants to distort the soldiers' realities? No, but if you know what the name of that episode is, I'd love to check it out. I watched Bandersnatch. That was wild. And Brad says, I'm going to be honest, I believe in it. Okay, great. So what do you believe about it and why? Let us know in the chat. I would love to hear more. And as we're waiting for that, let's talk. Well, we're going to talk a little bit about the history of law of attraction so that we know where it's coming from. But one of the things about belief, right, is ask yourself this. When you believe in something, ask yourself, why do I need to believe in this? If it was true, why would belief be needed? Right? And now that's not totally a winner, because there are some things that you might have beliefs around regardless of whether they're true or not. But think of that. Like, the sun comes up every day. It doesn't require your belief. It doesn't come up either, but that's the word that we use for it, right? It doesn't require you to believe in it. Things that are true just really don't require our belief, do they? Very rarely. So we got to think about that. Brad says, I used to be an atheist at a young age and cannot deny I always used my gut. Okay. Say more about how that leads you to have, reasons to believe in law of attraction. And I'd be curious why you're no longer an atheist. I've certainly had things that challenge my quote unquote atheism. I don't really think of it as atheism, but those things that have challenged it just haven't panned out. They haven't stood up to reason. Okay. Men Against Fire is that episode. Thank you for all these suggestions. I love when you all give suggestions about what to look at and books to read and stuff. Keep them coming. I do my best to catch up with them. So, Black Mirror, Men Against Fire. I'm going to check that out. Just your description of the episode makes me think of Source Code. Did you ever see that movie? That was a very interesting movie about free will and implants. Well, not really implants in the brain, but some sort of brain-computer interface. Matthew says, to defend at Brad, I think there is substance to the law of attraction. Oh, thank you for that. I mean, I think I've also lent some credence to the idea already as well, but I want to hear specifically, what is that substance that you think is there? I've already said, and I'd love to know more. Jennifer says, belief involves religious and scientific way. Okay, that's interesting. Love to hear more about that. Let's keep the discussion going. Appreciate your thoughts. Pedro is here from Brazil. And hello, Pedro. Thanks for saying hello. And Croneman Walking says, I believe in a version of the law of attraction, except I don't call it a law. LOL. I'm not an atheist or a member of organized religion. I can do without God. Nature is my church. Excellent, excellent. Brad says, skipped my comment. I'm not sure which comment you're referring to. Can you pop it in again? I'm not sure. You say, I just do. I took an honest assessment of my nature and realized my only success in life followed the law of attraction. Great. What's an example? What's an example, and why does it substantiate the law of attraction? Sorry I missed that comment, but thanks for drawing attention to it. If I ever miss anything, just let me know. If you saw what I'm seeing, you'd think that you were on board the Starship Enterprise. All right. So I'm looking forward to more than that. Look, and one of the reasons why we push for this is because without specific examples, we can't think critically about it, right? If we just generalize, we wind up skipping over the point, which is if you make a claim that it's evidence of the law of attraction, why is it? What is it? And why does that meet the conditions of proof or evidence for what specific definition of the law of attraction? We need to be specific. So you might want to define what it is that you believe about the law of attraction. And I'd be interested also in Cronenwald and Walking's take on that as well. And why not a law, which is very interesting. Because nature, we call a lot of things in nature laws. So that'd be interesting to know more about. Matthew says, from my belief, it's about changing your perspective to being open to new stimuli. So you essentially become more aware of opportunities in that realm. That certainly can be an outcome that happens. But why is that anything to do with law of attraction? And why do you believe that that is connected to the ideas of law of attraction? We defined law of attraction for the purposes of today's discussion. So why does that stand in evidence in favor of this idea that there's a universal intention and a purpose of the universe? How does that provide evidence for that? How does that support that claim? All right. So Bracken says, I'm giving it a try in layman language. Well, give it in a specific language. If you have another language that you speak, another dialect or whatever, go hard. I mean, I got a PhD, 2 MAs, and a BA. I ought to be able to figure it out. So don't have to speak like a layman to me. I memorize words from Ong here in Ramus, like lucubration. So we can handle it. We got a dictionary here. Rip it out. Hanafi says, the law of attraction most definitely works. If you are critical of it, you simply don't understand it and put it into practice. You don't understand it and put it into practice with personal results. You literally do create your reality. Well, that's a problem, right? I didn't create reality. I didn't create reality at all. I just showed up here one day and started to notice that there was a me or a thing that I thought was me. I didn't create reality at all. And it's not my reality to create. It really isn't. So that's interesting. And here's the problem. I can say, you know what? You're critical of memory science. You don't understand it. You obviously don't understand it. I don't know what you understand or don't understand. How can you know what another person understands? Could it not be the case that they are critical of it precisely because they understand it better than you? You got to really think about the logic of what you're saying there, because to be critical of something does not mean that that person doesn't understand it. You then have to turn that around and say, maybe there's other people out there who do understand things better than I do, and maybe they understand some different segment about it, and maybe they do understand it. Think about that. I don't really think that someone being critical of something is a sign that they don't understand it. It might be a sign that they're trying to understand it, but it's not a sign that they don't understand it. So, Hanafi, I appreciate that, but you've got some things to qualify there. Brad says, the brain is so sophisticated we haven't approached what it is picking up on. The primal brain is very powerful. It doesn't have to be metaphysical. The law of attraction is just an educated guess. Okay, well, I agree. The brain is certainly something we don't fully understand. And the question, though, is the word sophisticated right for what the brain is? That's, it may not be sophisticated at all. It actually may be a kludge, K-L-U-G-E. And there's some interesting studies of the brain and evolution and how that it's evolved and it's quite a potent and powerful thing, but its actual structure being sophisticated, the entire human body is a kludge, and so much of nature is a kludge. So sophisticated may not be the right word there. And then in terms of the law of attraction being an educated guess, I wouldn't go around in pride that I just made an educated guess about this law that supposedly governs reality. That sounds like a pretty, well, let's just say we could potentially approach things at a higher level than that. Bracket says, law of attraction is nothing, but you start working even unconsciously towards your goal and you do not realize it. You see your goal everywhere. It may sound weird, but it's what I felt. Excellent. And I don't disagree with that. But why is that a universal law that shows international, I was going to say, shows purpose to the universe? So again, I have a specific definition that I presented today of what this is, and I'm looking for you to provide evidence with an actual definition of your own. And I'll talk about this thing of seeing your goal everywhere later, because I don't think it has anything to do with law of attraction, and there are finer and fitter ways to get there. All right, but let's look at some of the history of this, because that'll help us understand more of why this is a problematic issue and topic. And as you continue, please keep your comments coming. I really appreciate them. Hit the thumbs up if you're just joining us and haven't done so yet, or if you already have. Thank you very much. Thanks for saying hello if you already have. Let me know in the chat what you're thinking and where you are in the world, what you're doing, how things are going for you. So apparently it really originates with this guy, Phineas Quimby. And he claimed that something called the truth cured his tuberculosis. And basically, some people think this is the origins of the mind over body philosophy. And there's no doubt that your thinking can certainly help you heal. For example, thinking about improving your diet, thinking about certain fitness regimes and so forth. I really honestly don't know enough about the whole relationship between thought and healing. But nonetheless, this is said to be one of the historical moments that this appears, this mind over body philosophy. And then later, this idea appears in Blavatsky, Madame Blavatsky, in Isis Unveiled. I haven't read this book myself, but apparently that's where it comes from. And somehow my slides have gotten out of order, but I might be missing a slide here. In any case, there's a little bit more to the history, but it ends up showing up particularly in The Secret, which is Rhonda Byrne, I think is her name. And this basically culminates in this idea that there's some sort of purpose, that if you can visualize the outcome of what it is and feel that outcome in the present moment. Obviously, there's previous indicators to this, Tony Robbins, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. If you can somehow do that, if you could feel it, then you're better able to direct yourself through creative visualization. And that's pretty much the history. But one of the things, again, we want to see here is that it's all kind of on a binary positive, negative level. And so I want to suggest that there's things that we can do instead. Again, if you are watching now and you want to add some more details about what it is that you think law of attraction is, and some evidence specifically in your experience that shows it's working, please do. Brad says, I've adopted a lot of strange beliefs lately. Your arguments are perfectly logical, and I do agree, but I'm trying to figure out why it's attracting my attention. Well, that's good. If you do figure it out, let me know. And, there's nothing wrong with strange beliefs as long as we are willing to analyze them, maybe dissect them a little bit. Look, if it doesn't cause you a bit of discomfort to do self-analysis, then it's not self-analysis. We've got to really poke into ourselves. So in any case, let's talk about what I suggest you do instead. And we'll wrap this together with memory and how you're using memory techniques. So I would suggest you become a skeptic. And a skeptic is not a cynic. It's not a nihilist. It's not anything like that. It's just someone who says, look, this is a claim being made in the world. I would like to see some evidence, and I would like to see that evidence actually support the claim, to validate it or to deny its. I've somehow started stuttering here. To somehow deny its validity. This is very, very important. That's all that's really going on there, right? And so again, I have to mention Michael Shermer. I love this book, Skeptic. Highly recommend that you read it. But also, Why People Believe Weird Things is just fantastic. And I'm so grateful that I read it. James Randi, because he's a magician, also was a huge influence. And Penn Jillette also does some great work around this. And so one of the best ways to learn more about skepticism is to read Skeptics. And, don't dismiss them. try and find, and they're just humans too. And, Shermer's one of the best because he actually goes and does some of these things. He investigates them on the ground, and he's just had some really, really great things. So there's a video with him and Dan Harlan actually that I just absolutely love, where they go out and do some debunking. And Dan Harlan is actually performing here in Australia, and I've got tickets to go see that. So I'm looking forward to that. In any case, by studying skeptics, you can learn more about skepticism. But also, I prepared something for you, which is 3 reasons why skeptics succeed with memory techniques better than anyone else. Skepticism is a huge part of why a lot of people get very, very successful with memory techniques. And a lot of people have asked me over the years, how do I convince my friends that memory techniques work? And I thought, well, why are they unconvinced? Well, they're skeptical. Great! If you're a true skeptic, you will go out and test the claims for yourself. It's very, very difficult for people to prove that memory techniques won't work for them if they really, really do what's required, what is asked of them. It's very, very difficult because of how they work, right? It's just going to make you remember stuff better. And you can look at all the science in the world. It's really up to you to run the experiments. So let me check in with the chat. But by the way, if you want this episode of the podcast in the full text, it's down in the link below. You can follow up with that. And it's been a fairly popular episode and blog post. All right. So let's see here. Brundheimer is in the house. Good to see you, Brundheimer. Thanks for being here. Forest Strategy says, from all the research I've done, I would say law of attraction should be called reframing toward an outcome mixed with the placebo effect. Both work very well. Yeah, great. I'm glad you mentioned the placebo effect, actually, because there's some research that's come out recently where they think that actually there may be a genetic component to why the placebo effect works, because it doesn't actually work in all people. And so that's interesting and something to look further into. And it might be an explanation of why some people are more hooked and unable to get away from some of the junky ideas in the law of attraction and not able to get past that and hook themselves on. It may be a genetic thing. Isn't that fascinating? I don't know, but we'll see what happens. Brad says, although I bet science will catch up and prove some of these crazy beliefs. The gut instinct, genetic memory, especially ESP, yada, yada. Well, look, science is definitely going to quote unquote catch up, but there's a certain element here where we don't necessarily need it to catch up with certain things. And the time to believe in these things is when it has caught up with it. And really, at the end of the day, if you have ESP, why aren't you saving the world? Why would why would you think of that as even something that exists before that you're doing something extraordinarily powerful with it? All right. So Brundheimer says should be called attraction reframing. I won't go on the evidence chase, but it's clearly not a universal law. That is true. Yeah. A universal law needs to work universally. Gravity, for example, works universally, but notice too that gravity doesn't work the same way in all places. And so even though it's a universal law, it works differently. And some people could just come and say, yeah, well, law of attraction works differently because it depends on your belief. And if you're critical of it, then, it's never going to work for you, which is a very, very profoundly false thing. And I can only, again, give the example of all the Sanskrit that I've memorized. I remain critical of all that sort of stuff, and yet it's still working great for me, right? So my being critical of it doesn't mean that I don't understand the traditions of Advaita Vedanta and the Vedic, texts and philosophy and all that sort of stuff. It would be, I'm sure there's parts of it I don't understand, but the very fact that I'm critical of it is not evidence that I don't understand it, as came up earlier in the chat, in a way that just doesn't stand to reason. So Jennifer says, it is a feeling or an instinct in the brain to do something based on your belief traditionally or scientifically. Yeah, well, where does that come from? I appreciate that, Jennifer, but where are you taking that from? Is that what you're saying? Or, where do we get this idea that it's a feeling or instinct in the brain to do something? Because that's not what I understand law of attraction to be. The law of attraction is not about instincts. It's about trying to get an outcome by imagining that you already have it. So I'm not sure but I appreciate that comment and would love to hear more. Brad says, can you clarify how the law of attraction is incompatible? What is the specific topic? So I'm not sure I follow your question. I didn't say it was incompatible. I just say it doesn't exist. So the specific topic here is visualization and creative visualization working to help you attract better health, wealth, and relationships is the three big things that they say that it works, but also memory. So there are some law of attraction-esque recordings. I'm not going to name those specific ones. You can go and find it for yourself. And they're it's not like they're lacking in absolute value, but they're not. We're going to talk about it in a minute. What actually will work, without a doubt, will work, and that can use some of the good stuff from that. But they're absolutely just false leads, because they're trying to get you, first of all, to visualize outcomes and to feel those outcomes, when that's not what gets you the result. It's not what gets you the result in memory. There's things for speed reading like this, where you're supposed to listen to these recordings and visualize in particular ways. It's just a false lead. And it's not that it can't do things that will help certain people, but it's just not the real deal. It's not the real deal. And there is the real deal. So love to hear more of what you mean there by me clarifying that it's incompatible, but it has to actually exist in order to be compatible. So I haven't really meant to say that it was incompatible with anything. I'm just saying it doesn't exist. So Brackett says, I need to memorize a lot of information on a daily basis throughout the year, like news, areas, constitution, history, different subject. Please guide me where to start. Great. I suggest you go to magneticmemorymethod.com/YT, take my free course, Bracket Hackers, and then when you have a proper Memory Palace network, you'll be able to start to use that Memory Palace network to just encode information using elaborative encoding and or what I call magnetic imagery, and use that magnetic imagery in order to get it so that you can recall it very easily a sufficient number of times so it gets into long-term memory. It doesn't matter what the information is that much. What matters is that you actually have the palette upon which to paint, which is the Memory Palace network, and then you actually have the paints, which is the magnetic imagery, how to create it, how to actually infuse it, get it into the Memory Palaces, and then that you actually have the proper recall rehearsal process to get it into long-term memory. And you might want to throw in the big five depending on your own learning style there. Some people don't need it as much as others, but I'd throw it in anyway, just to be safe. So hope that helps, Bracket Hackers. Let me know if you have more more questions around that. Brunheimer says, I love your associations with genetics. I have read some good things about human capacity to express our genes by changing the variable of our environment, but I barely scratched that subject. Oh yeah, it's fascinating. I don't know why people love the woo-woo so much when the science is so much more interesting and fascinating. Although, look, to be fair, and it's one thing that I learned from Michael Shermer, is to be more curious and to really dive in deeply into, what exactly is going on here? Because there is a history here. And that history is fascinating. It has so many clues into why these ideas developed, why they catch on, why they stick. And unfortunately, it has the same clues that will help people get out of it when they want to, if they want to. Let's see here. Maricella says, yes, Anthony, people are very skeptical about mnemonics. They want all given, but they don't want to work on it. Yeah, well, thanks for pointing that out. And, if you haven't noticed, there's a link to this article I have on the screen here down in the description below, and you want to check that out. Because if you're skeptical, that's actually a good thing. And you can then just say, and I talk about this a lot on that page, look, I'm going to test this for myself, and here's how to test it. There's a way to test it, and it's very, very important. Brad says, I really appreciate this conversation for your info. This is great. No worry of offending me personally. Got you on your last point. Thank you, Brad. I appreciate that, and I appreciate you being here, and I appreciate all rebuttals. Look, this is not about taking anything personally. This is just a rational discussion between mature learners, which is what the Magnetic Memory Method hopes to help people become if they aren't already, and ideally you already are, because then we can just get down to business. Like Maricela says, some people just want it given to them. They don't want to do the work. Well, look, if you're doing it right, it isn't work in the first place. Memory techniques is just pure fun. The USA Memory Championships just happened. If you look at those photos, they might not look like the happiest people at the end, and that's because most of them didn't win, but they are happy. They're having a lot of fun, okay? Like, it's just amazing how much fun it is to use memory techniques. It's incredible. Just reading this word, lucubration, bam, it's in the head. It's like, what could be more fun than that? What could be more fun than that? Cronenman Walking says, unfortunately, I think Shirley MacLaine talking about it on Oprah, people might get the idea of creative visualization of any form of woo-woo. Her book was my first memory book. LOL, in a way. Okay. All right. I didn't see the Shirley MacLaine Oprah episode, but yeah, I mean, one of the things is that you have a lot of what's called, celebrity association there. Celebrities putting their weight behind it. And because they say that that's part of how they got there, then people go, oh, well, then that must be the case. But there's a lot more factors involved in them getting where they're at. So, if everybody who did creative visualization to become an actor had their chance, well, there would be no hierarchy in acting, and there would be no need for the Oscars or any of the other awards and so forth. There's obviously something more to it than just sitting around visualizing an outcome, right? Hanafi says, you clearly have not even tried to test it by doing visualization to gain an outcome. Hence, you aren't a skeptic and not qualified to discuss it. If it works, it works if you believe it, which is key. Well, Hanafi, thanks for that. However, how do you know what I've tried to test or not? I've actually spent more time than was warranted trying to test this. And what I found was something better that worked. So if you care to stick around, I'll share that with you. But I spent more than enough time with trying creative visualization and law of attraction. And you are exposing some aspects of yourself by saying you have clearly not even tried to test it. How do you know that? And what are you revealing about yourself by so staunchly making that claim? That's not, you might want to, and we've got 24% of people wanted to talk about critical thinking. You might think more critically about what you type before you type it, because you might actually turn this around and say, have you tried to test it as taught? And then you might get an answer that doesn't need to be combative and point out some less than strong elements in your comment, right? Think about that. So, carrying on, Bracket Hacker says, thanks a lot, sir. It's helpful. Ernesto is here from Brazil. Good to see you, Ernesto. Thanks for saying hello. If you're just joining us, hit the thumbs up. Let me know where you are in the world, what you're doing, what you're thinking, and if you have any questions or comments. Ernesto is here from Brazil. Oh, yeah, sorry, I just said that. Shubham says, can you explain creative visualization briefly? I joined late. Yes, great. So it's the idea, particularly, that you're going to feel what it's like to have achieved an outcome that you wanted, typically around the area of wealth, health, or relationships. It could be career, which is generally under the rubric of wealth in most cases, because not a lot of people are sitting around hoping they would get paid less, are they? So it's generally around that sort of thing. And a great book, if you want to read it, 59 Seconds by Richard Weissman. He makes a great point there of showing some of the problems with this outcome, because what people end up doing is they end up visualizing and feeling themselves at this other side of outcomes that are actually impossible for them to achieve. The typical example is the person who wants to get really ripped at the gym in the health category. They're going to visualize, and often the way it's taught is you're going to be in bed, you don't want to go to the gym, but you're visualizing yourself coming in through the door like Arnold Schwarzenegger, right? Well, it's going to be impossible for most people to ever achieve Arnold Schwarzenegger outcomes because they don't even have the skeleton to do it, right? They don't have the frame to do it. There are actually different body types, and whatever you would do at the gym, you'd better visualize, if you're going to play that kind of game, exactly the kind of thing that your body is capable of doing. Otherwise, you're looking at pain, suffering, failure, and frustration that's just going to create a mental hell for yourself. So that's one problem. And also the other thing is visualizing outcomes that you haven't had yet. you don't even really know what it's like to have those outcomes. So that visualization that you're making is basically not only outside of your existing competence to actually achieve that outcome, but it's outside of your experience, and your experience may be deeply misguided. So especially in wealth and so forth, people don't realize the amount of problems that wealth creates, and it's not all tickety-boo necessarily, right? So they're creating a fantasy picture, and they're not even really entirely sure that they want that outcome. It's really something to think about. Should you really be using creative visualization to imagine outcomes that are so far from what you could ever even know that you actually want, right? It's very, very important to think that through. So if you were going to visualize and be in this sort of realm, then what you're better guided to do is to visualize something that's in your existing competence to actually do. So instead of visualizing yourself coming in through the door ripped like Arnold Schwarzenegger, maybe you want to visualize yourself putting your shoes on and going out the door, potentially to the gym. But if you can't get yourself to the gym, then you want to start with what it is you can do and visualize that. Now that's common sense that doesn't get taught in a lot of these books. Why? Because it's not dramatic enough. It's not fantasy enough. And it's just like, oh, I'm going to visualize myself putting on my shoes. Well, chances are that if you're going to use creative visualization, that's the thing that you're most likely to do because it's in your existing competence to do so. This is the theory of tiny habits in many ways, and it's very, very powerful. It's just not as attractive, and so it hasn't gotten as much traction in the market because it's just not as dramatic and so forth. But it's much more likely to work. Same thing in memory. Just if you could just draw a couple squares on a piece of paper, create your memory palace, your first memory palace, make it simple, as I teach in the free course. It's just like maximum 10 stations or, minimum 10 stations. If you want to go more, you can, but, just keep it simple. Keep it simple. Just make that small little step. Get a pencil in your hand and a piece of paper. Break it down. You're much more likely to get there. And you know what? You don't have to sit around visualizing it. You just, pencil and paper. Well, I know what a pencil and paper is. I'll get it, and I'll do it. I'll put it into action. So I hope that helps you understand more about what creative visualization is supposed to be. In the world of memory techniques, when we're creatively visualizing, what we're doing is we're actually using a number of sensations and modalities that allow us to make links between information we don't know and information that we want to know, like lucubration, right? I didn't know that meant to stay up late studying, right? So what I got to do is I got to creatively visualize, how am I going to memorize this? So, Luke Skywalker, Luke, and bray. Well, that's like what a donkey does, right? Braying like a donkey. And then I realized later, I know this guy named Aubrey, right? So get those things together. There's multiple sensations that can be worked there, right? And then ation, lucubration. Well, like a space station, right? Which is kind of natural to Luke Skywalker. But then what is he doing there? Well, he's staying up late studying for his Jedi exam. Lucubration. Bam, like that. Now, you don't need to visualize yourself having that ability. You could just start to do it. I don't see the picture in my head or anything like that. I have a memory palace for it, but it's just the way that it goes. And it's not visualization. It's magnetic memory method. And if you don't do it, the evil Dr. Forget will snatch that away. It'll snatch it away from me as much as it will from anybody else. All right. So, let's check in with our chat. If you're just joining us, hit the thumbs up. Let me know where you are in the world, what you're doing, what you're thinking. I hope that helped you, Shubham. Bruntiver says, I think law of attraction is a simplified creation of unknown phenomenon by the observer. It just happens naturally when we don't know so much about how the mind, body, and environment works. Right, but I mean, this is lending credence to a thing that we still can't see as a law. It doesn't seem to qualify to deserve that word law. Matthew says, just curious, are you going to recommend transcendental meditation at the end? No, I'm not. You say, I feel it's like a close relative to the law of attraction, and it has a lot of mental performance studies to back it up. I'd have to look at some of those studies. Look, I do chanting. This is not a secret. I've recited 32 verses of the Ribhu Gita live with my eyes closed on this channel. I have no doubt that there's benefits to this. When it comes to TM, I have a major criticism, though, which is, why do you need to pay someone for a word, right? And I'm not against the idea that something in Sanskrit, some properties of Sanskrit, may create certain effects in the brain. But we don't have the studies for it. We don't really have, that I know of, any demonstration that these consonants and these vowels said in this order at this time or anything like that are going to create this outcome. Really, it's like a melange or a kludge of so many different things that you bring together, and the meaning that you impute upon it has a great deal to do with it, and it's something that's called expectation effect. Now, expectation effect is not proof of law of attraction. So I should have made a slide all about expectation effect, but I appreciate these questions because it brought it to mind. This is very, very important. So yeah, there may be some performance studies around TM in particular, but I think that at the end of the day, the problem with TM is that it's very much linked with a cult, and the idea of paying for a Sanskrit word, really? I mean, obviously you get some training as well, but there's dogma in it, and so much of that dogma is just locking people into the very same prison they're trying to escape. So I have a book that's coming out in the near future all about this, and it's all about meditation. It's like why that I chose this particular text, why it doesn't have to be that text, why that because that text has valuable properties, what the valuable properties are, and the very fact of the matter is that it has to do with the knowledge gained from the text, not necessarily the text itself. It could be this text, that text, and so forth. That knowledge can be contemporary, it can be totally secular. It just happens to be that I memorized something from a sort of like pseudo-religious philosophical system that is very, very interesting to me for reasons we'll get into in that book. All right. Brunheimer says, I think it's okay to think that the law of attraction works. We simplify many subjects we have no clue about. Modern science is hard to grasp and out of the reach of most people. Potentially, I would agree that it's okay to think that it works. I mean, why would I fight against it? People do. But I don't think that science is, I don't think that the fact that science, well, I'm not even sure if it's a fact that it's out of the reach of most people. I think it's out of the willingness of most people, out of the interest of most people, but I don't think it's out of the reach of most people. And I might be stubborn about that to my own detriment, but I certainly, with my survey and 53% of people saying they want more memory science, am here to talk about science. So if you're here and you weren't one of those people who selected that on the survey, you might want to be more involved in the community tab and share what it is that you would like to be seeing. Because obviously all scientific discovery must include discussions of pseudoscience. And I just simply don't really think that science is out of the reach of most people. I don't think it's hard to grasp. I think that what is going on is that a lot of people just simply don't want to do the groundwork, and it's not hard to grasp at all. It's actually very fun. Hanafi says, a key aspect of visualization is action. It's not just about visualization without any action. This is a key misunderstanding. Visualization is just one component of the law of attraction. Well, I'll agree with that, Hanafi. Action is what is needed, but why do you then need the law of attraction woo-woo nonsense? Because you don't need the law of attraction in order to just have what we'll talk about on the next slide, which is, and maybe you have psychic powers, the law of action, right? So we'll talk about that, but I want to keep with our chat here. Matthew Snow says, that's more of the eye of the beholder, though. Plus, having more extreme visualizations could incite more motivation and excitement, which could lead to a higher chance of action. It could, Matthew, but we need to, we just need to see more people really getting more action from that. And again, like, look, science hasn't studied everything under the sun, but in the scientific studies that have been done, all of which are very, very interesting, we just really don't see a lot of people taking more action by having visualizations of things that are outside of their competence, their existing competence. So much of your chances of actually succeeding come from knowing your existing competence, knowing it well, and then actually putting a plan in place that helps you knock off those things that you actually can do so you make real progress. And so motivation, inspiration, excitement, they're not necessarily going to help you knock off the things that are in your existing competence. And you may also be psychic, because that's coming up as well here too. You don't need motivation or anything like that. It's not a necessary component of success. And a lot of people mistakenly say, oh, well, I just don't feel motivated. You don't need to feel motivated. Believe me, I didn't feel very motivated to go to the gym today, and I rarely do, but I go 3 times a week, almost every week, minimum 2 times a week, completely without motivation to do so. It's just not necessary. And also, here I will say, there is kind of a sense of motivation, there's a sense of visualization, because I will picture myself at the gym. But that's not what gets me to go there. That's usually what demotivates me, right? So I have to have higher purpose and reason and so forth. And usually it's like this paradox between, oh, I don't want to go to the gym, but I have to go to the gym. I'm almost driven to by the force of habit, which seems to have a lot to do with myelin sheaths in the brain. Myelin that is really, really part of habit formation. All right. So Brad says, I do not believe it is a law of the universe to be clear, but I think it taps into a real law, whatever that is. I cannot defend it logically, but I have become a skeptic of science. Sounds like a slope, but I'm very confident in my genuine curiosity and trust I won't dive into anything too crazy. The Secret has this visualization exercise where you close your eyes and imagine your hands. Great. So let's pick up on some of what you're saying here, Brad. Becoming a skeptic of science is what science is. So to be a skeptic of science, where's the problem there? That's what you're supposed to do. That's what science is. Science is a tool that helps us gather evidence in support of claims, or it helps us deny the validity of claims, demonstrate the validity of claims. So to be a skeptic of science is just what science is. So I don't know what you're skeptical about. If you're skeptical about how humans use that tool, then, where is skepticism involved? That's called criticism, right? If you're critical of how humans use that tool, then that's a different discussion altogether. But science is the tool of rationality that helps direct the force of our skepticism. So to be skeptic of science, great. That's what it's there for. That's what it does. That's what it's for. And your genuine curiosity is great, and if it keeps you safe, great. And I don't know what exactly this visualization exercise is where you imagine your hands and your eyes and so forth, but it is, again, for you to draw a connection between what exactly that exercise is, what it relates to in terms of anything that could be called a law, and how that it created an outcome where you can tie the two things together and say, that was definitely from that, right? Because the reality is if you're truly skeptical about it, what you're probably going to come to is that there were so many competing forces at work that to attribute it to this, that, or the other thing, it just won't work. It won't hold water. You're going to have to look at many, many different things all at the same time. Brundheimer says, remember Gary Weber, our sense of the eye can be a summary of post-it. Visualization is a form of mind reframing, and if done well, it can change a lot in someone. Right. I appreciate that, Brundheimer. I don't know how that provides evidence for the law of attraction, however. David says, first time on your live stream from Bermuda. Good to see you, David. Thanks for saying hello. If you're just joining us, hit the thumbs up. Let me know where you are in the world, what you're doing, what you're thinking, how things are going. Matthew says, TM could just be your own mantra, at least the less rigid forms, LOL. Well, this is the thing, right? Are we going to do it, or are we going to do the less rigid form, right? So this is I don't necessarily have the answer to it, but what exactly are we talking about? Are we talking about TM or are we not? And so the less rigid it gets, then what's the point of even calling it that, right? be creative, come up with your own name. Chanel is in the house over on Facebook. So Facebook is working. Weird. Thanks for being here. You've said that it works for you. Please let us know what exactly you did and why you believe it was that did the work. Matthew says, I am awesome at ... But yeah, expectations agreed. Okay. Shubham says, thanks. Imagining or recreating a crime scene is kind of like Sherlock. Is it visualization? Sherlock Holmes does not exist, so I don't know. I would venture no, it's not. It's a form of fiction, and that form of fiction has created all kinds of strange ideas about what people can do because a fictional character can do it. And I would just point to you to 2 weeks ago, Matt Dillahunty went hard on the whole Sherlock Holmes worship thing, and I've long not been impressed by Sherlock Holmes myself, and have written about it on the Magnetic Memory Method blog and the podcast. So David says, isn't state of mind also important? Absolutely, it is, but it's not necessarily evidence for the law of attraction. And state of mind is very, very important, and we'll talk about that. But I appreciate that question. And thanks for being here. By the way, if you're new here and you're not subscribed to this channel, get subscribed. Click the bell if you'd like to be notified of new live streams. We are doing lots on memory techniques usually, but this is a special topic because law of attraction came up from one of you. And also, many people said they want to hear more about memory science. And so we started a new series with woo-woo and pseudoscience to test the waters. Chanel says, I've used this process to help me remember vocabulary when learning languages. It does work. You just have to give it a chance. So, Chanel, why is that law of attraction? Visualization is not necessarily law of attraction. I'm all for visualizing to help remember vocabulary, which is what I gave an example of with lucubration. So I'd love to know more about why that has helped you, why you think it's law of attraction, or what's going on there. Crone Walking is going to watch TV with her husband and memorize the names of the TV characters. Awesome. Great memory exercise. That's a clue for all of you who want to practice memory techniques. You know, you can watch TV and movies guilt-free and just memorize the names of characters and get great brain exercise. Hanafi says, everything that has been created on Earth since the dawn of man started with a visualization in someone's imagination first. It's the first crucial component for the creation of everything. How do you know that? How do you know that? Everything is a big word. So is the dawn of man. And how do you know that? I really would like to know how you know that that's true. I'm not entirely convinced. I'm not sure that everything that was created on Earth was a visualization in someone's imagination first. I really don't know how you could provide evidence of that claim. Crone Woman Walking is off. Enjoy and have fun. Brundheimer says, I disagree about science being at our reach. Like you said, not a lot of people are interested into the details of it. That alone makes it difficult to talk to anyone about it, and it takes time. I got all the time in the world, Brundheimer, and I think it's the most important discussion of all. And I appreciate you being your disagreement. Look, science must be within our reach. If we are going to have a meaningful definition of what science is, it has to be within our reach. Otherwise, what are we talking about? It's precisely because it's within our reach that we can talk meaningfully about it. So I'm not sure that I think that we may have a cafe visit when I get to Quebec one time to I should probably keep that private. I apologize. But when I get to your region, and I hope my memory is right there, but so that could be two bad whammies, right? Assuming consent to reveal a location and then potentially getting it wrong. Whoop, that would be bad. But yeah, I apologize if. Let's just say, let me backtrack here. We can certainly delete this live stream after if that's something you'd rather not have there. Let me know. But we can meet in a cafe and maybe have a more nuanced discussion rather than this chatting back and forth. which, by the way, I was asking people if they would like to have this become a call-in show, and nobody seemed really all that excited about it. But I think that would be a fun way to have more nuanced discussions. How about you, people who are here? Matthew says, state of mind is important for degree of purpose, but not actually taking the action. I think I understand where Anthony is making his distinctions now. Yeah, right. That's right. Because if I were to wait for I think state of mind is important. There's a guy named Ian Rowland who wrote a book called The Full Facts Book of Cold Reading. I think that's what it's called. Anyway, The Full Facts Book of Cold Reading. I believe that's what the title is. And one of the things that he does in there is he teaches you how psychics pull their stunts. And he has a whole section there on like mindset and helping yourself. So state of mind and mindset is really, really important. And he has one of the best discussions of it that I've ever read. And it's very powerful and useful, but it's not required, right? It's just simply not required. Again, I went to the gym this morning. I had to battle my mindset. I didn't change my mindset. I just went despite my mindset. Now you could argue, well, it's because you used your mindset and so forth. I think we're just getting to split hairs to a certain extent. But I absolutely acknowledge the role of mindset. It's very, very important, but it's not the definitive deciding factor. And for example, if a bike is coming at you at speed, you don't have to wait for your mindset to get out of the way, right? Afterwards, your mindset might be anger at that person for endangering you. Or you could notice that you're angry and then say, well, it's not that big of a deal. I'm not going to let that ruin my day. And that could partially be a mindset thing. But then even then, it's not just a mindset thing. It's actually having discernment and the wherewithal to not take things so seriously in life. Or you could actually have recognized that person and then, take some steps to, I don't know, whatever it is that you might do. Call them up and say, hey, did you know that you're endangering people? And or you could yell at them and be controlled by your anger or whatever. But your choice there is more than your mindset. It's your knowledge about behaving in the world that then helps you craft a better mindset and action thereafter. And so why I make that distinction is because you need to have the knowledge in order to change your mind, to even know that you have a mind to change. Like you have to have certain knowledge about that thing that you are strapped onto that is just constantly moving around, called the mind, right? And the more you have knowledge, the more you're able to discern what your own mind is doing and then shape its behavior and make it go in different directions in more intelligent ways. It's very, very important. But it's not mindset first. It's more knowledge first, and then that basis of knowledge, which a lot of comes from experience and study and application and failure and etc. But mindset is something that's like on top of that, and we need those things in place. All right. Brunheimer says, time that is sucked in Netflix, work, other societal traps and responsibilities. Indeed. Brunheimer says, LOL, I think I was not clear about my comments. I have no evidence of law of attraction and will never find one. I was trying to comment about some of the things that actually work. Yeah, well, there's no doubt that some of those things actually work. We'll get to that. David Wellman says, I am subscribed. Thumbs up. Awesome. Thank you, David. Good to have you here and joining our community. Ernesto says, where the skepticism fits within the so-called scientific consensus, are they voting now? Blind belief in what is labeled science has become an issue. The replication crisis went down the road. Yeah, that's a good point, Ernesto. The replication crisis, I don't think it's as big of a crisis as even to warrant the word crisis, but it is a problem. It is a huge problem. And it is also a problem that people have unwarranted, quote unquote, belief and faith in science. In my new book, I share some of my problems that having a blind faith in medicine, for example, led me into trouble. And I didn't have the tools. I didn't have the experience. I wasn't Tony Stark enough yet to think critically about what doctors were telling me. But let's be clear when we're talking about science, what we're actually talking about, right? And so the replication crisis doesn't necessarily pose any challenge to science as the tool that it is. It really doesn't. And it only is something that is challenging for us to work on and to solve. And this is what we're going to get to in today's presentation, although I'm much more enjoying conversing with you in the chat than plowing through it, but we'll get through it. And I appreciate that comment, Ernesto. Very powerful, very important contribution to our discussion. Thank you for being here. Matthew says, I never thought of memorizing character names. Absolutely, absolutely. Hanafi says, Einstein famously said imagination is more important than knowledge. All his theories were experiments in his imagination first. Everything is imagined first. Even Einstein clearly understood it. Oh, well, great for Einstein. This is the world's smallest violin. Congratulating him. Look, your quote of Einstein is not evidence of all the things that you still have yet to account for. So thank you for that. But Einstein doesn't just get the royal road to being correct because we can quote his statement that imagination is more important than knowledge. Do you know where he said that? What page? Can you give the reference so that we can go and look it up and see it in context? And how do you know that all of his experiments were in his imagination first? How do you know that? It's very, very simple to demonstrate why it's not that clear. It's not that crisp. He took a lot of walks with Gödel, for example. Gödel would challenge him. So technically, they may have been in somebody's imagination, but they weren't necessarily in his imagination first because Gödel said, well, what about this and a little bit of that? And then Einstein goes, ooh, right? So now it's actually a fusion of two minds, right? And those minds are fused with other minds, and those minds are fused with yet other minds. You could dial all the way back to Adam. Hello, Adam. I don't believe in Adam, but you could imagine yourself doing so, which if you know your literature, you know what literary reference I'm making there. And if you don't, well, if you're interested, you can ask. The reality here is that nobody is on their own, and whatever happened in Einstein's imagination is not Einstein's alone, and it didn't necessarily happen in his imagination. It can be an assemblage of multiple imaginations, and that's not only that it's with other people, but it's with the way that people assemble with the world. They assemble with nature. They assemble with the institutions that they create. And there's a lot of stuff going on there. So if you want to simplify things to meaningless quotes that are completely out of context, and if you have read the exact passage that came from, and you can point us to it, then we can potentially look it up and see what it meant in context. But to reduce things to these sort of quotes is not nearly as nuanced as I would hope to hear from you. Brunheimer says, I agree with you about science being at the reach of those who learn to look, but not for the majority of people. But the more people do the things you do, the more it might change that over time. Indeed. I think so. And I mean, this is the whole reason. We've got to continue to promote the literacy of science. Scientific literacy is so important because so many people have opinions about things that they are not literate in, and we've got to avoid that. And when we don't know, we just have to say that we don't know. That's very, very important. And one of the things that we're going to have science thrust upon us, and it's all the more reason to become literate in science, because it's getting to be more and more thrust upon us. All the stuff with algorithms, all the updates on the internet and so forth, they are because of the application of science to human psychology and its interaction with technology. And that technology is in the hands of some corporate interests who are extraordinarily scientific. And the more that you know about the science that they're applying to us, which is computer science and business science, economic science, the better you are able to navigate the world. And it's another reason why we need to have the tools of real skepticism, which is not cynicism or anything like that, and real critical thinking skills, which is not all dark and gloomy, but an actual positive application of playing things through, not going into, just like random quotes as evidence, but actual citations and looking things through in context and building things through multiple layers of the complexity that exists in the world and paying them their due, because it's very, very important to do so. So thanks for that. Maricella says that she loves the law of attraction. Her first option to study a career was psychology, all about mind, study books. Well, Maricella, what is your definition of the law of attraction, and why do you love it? What about it do you love, and what evidence for its existence makes you love it? Why use such a strong word like love? Brunheimer says, yes, I live near Ottawa. You were right. Love the coffee. Okay, so I feel exonerated. Thank you very much. The memory works. Benjamin is in the house. Good to see you, Ben. Had a great live stream with Ben last time, and really appreciate all the knowledge that you shared, and also on the podcast. That was a lot of fun. Benjamin says, still reading the new book. Great so far. So thank you for continuing to read it. Glad that you are, you're the one of two first test readers. Well, third, technically, when you take the editor into account. And really appreciate you and your comments, and it's making for a much better draft. I don't know what you think. I think I'm going to cut like half of the introduction out, but maybe make it an appendix or something like that. Brad asks, what is my opinion on modern psychology? Thanks for asking, Brad. When you say modern, what do you mean? You mean like 1900 to 1950, or do you mean contemporary, as in today's psychology? I can tell you that I don't know that much about what's happening right now, or even in the last 10 years, really. I haven't paid that much attention to it. So if you mean by modern, contemporary, I don't quite have an opinion that is warranted. But when it comes to, say, Socrates to Lange's, I can jam a bit on psychology, and typically modern psychology. Well, I don't know. I have to map it onto modernism as such. So let me know if you have more specific questions on that. Supash says, is magnetic memory method helpful to develop neurons in our brains? I don't know that I could answer that. You asked what is our capacity for memory also. Some people consider it a zettabyte human memory. And if you want the reference on that, you can look at David Eagleman's book, which is The Brain. It is there he talks about it being a zettabyte, and I didn't memorize what page that's on, but in any case, great book. And a zettabyte is just incomprehensible to me. I really don't know. But in terms of the magnetic memory method helping you develop new neurons, I don't know if I would be qualified to say that, but basically, one of the things that is quite well known to happen in memory formation is that the synapses, they fuse together, and they fuse together in such a way that the neuronal networks link. But whether it creates new neurons, I don't know. I'm really not sure. But thanks for that question. Very compelling. And we could look into it in future live streams that involve science. Matthew says, getting back to your law of attraction, it definitely was the case in me accomplishing my goal of becoming a software engineer. It took me years of self-studying every day. Maybe a few days of a month, I would actually be motivated. Okay, so great. Thank you for that, Matthew. Specific example. What about the law of attraction is responsible for that? And why do you think that it was responsible for that outcome? Wouldn't the years of studying take credit, for example? And what about the motivation? If you only were motivated a few days in a month, where is law of attraction in evidence here? Oh, sorry, you say law of action. There's a mental problem for me. My bad, Matthew. My bad. I was misreading here. I have the Starship Enterprise in front of me. Action, indeed. Yes, that is great evidence of that. So let's talk about that, get to our slides. Draven, thanks for being here. Thanks for your question. We'll catch up with that in a minute if I remember. So if the law of attraction just isn't satisfactory, no one here can seem, we can't seem to converge very much on this idea. So what does work? Well, the law of action, right? Now, here I say action creates attraction. What do I mean? Well, for example, right now I'm taking action and it has attracted you. You're here and you may have a different level of attention than other people, but I'm taking an action. I show up almost every week doing these live streams, and that attracts people. How do I do it? Well, there's technology in place that makes it possible. If it wasn't possible, I wouldn't be able to do it, right? I'd have to go out on the street and just start talking. And that would likely attract people as well of a certain breed. Not nearly as well as this technology. So we're thankful and grateful for this technology. Please, internet people, don't ruin this. It's amazing. Just let it unfold in the positive ways. There's lots of rules coming out all the time. There's now live streaming rules on Facebook, and they're changing their connection with the software we're using, and optimization, etc., etc. But it's the action that actually creates the attraction. There's nothing that happens without action. And yes, I'm aware of some of the law of attraction teachings making clear that you have to take action, but I think that a huge part of the actions they're asking you to take are absolutely bankrupt in every way and unlikely to work for most people. Because what you need to do is that action you take needs to be based on your existing competence. It doesn't need to be, I don't want to be so strict about that, but I'll give you an example. I always wanted to be a published author. To this date, I've very rarely had anything published by a publishing house or a magazine. I've had a couple of magazine articles and so forth. But apparently it's not in my existing competence to be able to get published by a big publishing house, right? So did I sit around and wait in order to become a better writer who was able to do that? No. My existing competence was that I knew how to do stuff with the internet and websites and computers, and I knew how to write. And even if my first books were not that great, and my first blog posts are really not that great, I was able to still use what was there, my existing competence, my existing writing skill, and the internet to start to create what has become the most amazing memory community that I know of here on this channel. Like, it's just incredible, you guys, and all the people. It's just unbelievable. But I had, and I still have to this day, set goals based on my existing competence. If I'm not competent to do it, then I have to take the steps that make me competent in whatever that goal is, right? It's very, very important. And because I'm aware of that, I set better goals, and then I'm able to actually moderate what visualization I might do, which is rarely any kind of visualization in my head, because there's no point in visualizing it in my head. Where does it make sense? On mind maps, right? Visualize it outside in the world so that my eyes can see it, right? So is that visualization? Well, in a sense, it's visualization, but mind mapping is huge. It's a very, very huge thing. Outlining is huge. It is an action when based on your existing competence that allows you to visualize the steps that need to be taken or the shape of what it is that you're going to do and how you're going to do it. And it is really much more powerful than sitting with my eyes closed and saying, to be fair, that does happen. I do sit, like my meditation will be broken, and all of a sudden I'll have an idea, right? You go and do it. I have no problem sitting and meditating with this and capture some of those ideas so that I can put them in a quote, the not now folder, and then just put it beside me and simply go back to meditating. And very, very powerful. But it is then not really visualization. It's taking the idea and capturing it. Or I'll use memory techniques to capture it if I don't have my notebook nearby, etc., etc. So very, very important. And I don't wait for motivation or inspiration. I know something needs to get done, And so I figure out what it is that I need to do it. And it's rarely sitting around visualizing. Because I do sit around and meditate and so forth, that does help me notice my state and get it done anyway. So I'm a big proponent of meditating. But that's really, really important. I'd never wait for motivation, never wait for inspiration. Action creates everything. So if I don't have ideas, I will write down and say, I don't have any ideas. Why don't I have any ideas? And then I'll just start typing my name over and over and over again. It's been years since I actually have done that because I don't get writer's block. I got lists and lists of ideas that I have externally visualized into all kinds of spreadsheets and mind maps and all kinds of stuff. Like, it's just endless. I have 50 articles already prepared for the blog post that's just ready to go. Just, need to sharpen up, improve, etc., record for the podcast, etc. It's just endless. And if I had waited for motivation for any of that, inspiration for any of that, never would have happened. And here's the most important thing. A lot of people try to avoid making mistakes, but I just acknowledge that mistakes will happen and go and do it anyway. And, don't hope that mistakes won't happen. Don't wish that mistakes won't happen. Don't pray that they won't happen. Just allow them to come into being and so forth. So this is very, very important. Now, the next thing is, and this is the key point, this is the kicker. This is the thing that I think law of attraction completely murders itself into ridiculous stupidity. It is teaching you to envision what you want. Well, I'll tell you something. The universe doesn't care what you want. And the world doesn't care what you want. If you're going to sit there and visualize something, you'd better visualize what other people want and then figure out how to give it to them. Because that is what makes it possible for you to get what you want. And probably, if you do all of that properly, you will be very, very lacking in wants. You will have very few things that you actually want. So that's what I mean by extrovert your visualization. Instead of thinking about you, think about the world. Think about this opportunity you have to integrate, to assemble, to be part of this thing that's going on. That's what you should visualize. Not what you want, but what it is that the world wants from you and what you have a competence in you to give, and then start to figure out how to give it as soon as possible. You don't have to be super passionate about it necessarily. You don't have to wait for your passion. You don't have to wait for your inspiration. You just have to figure out what is it that the world needs and wants and that you're capable of being a part of. So, there's a really interesting guy named Dan Sullivan who talks about the entrepreneur visionary type, and then he talks about the type of person who supports the entrepreneur visionary. Then he talks about like the academic who just sits there and criticizes the world and ultimately stays in academia, becomes a professor that just, craps all over the great things in the world and does all this stuff that we see so much in the university now. And then you have like the kind of person who gets through university and then just manages to go and work for the person who supports the entrepreneur, right? It's not as clean as that, obviously, but it's just like A, B, C, D. And it's just a way of thinking of the world. And I really like that because it's an opportunity for everyone to think about where they are. If you were going to simplify the world that simple, which obviously there are reasons not to do that. If you were to think, okay, well, am I the visionary entrepreneur? If so, then what are the quote unquote laws that govern the world of visionary entrepreneurs? And who do I need to surround myself with in order to achieve these goals? And those goals will probably be that you need to think about, how can I contribute as a leader, as a manager, as an organizer, et cetera, in order to get those things in place? So it's actually this really small granular focus on the immediate team, so to speak, in order to make this bigger thing happen. So you need something that's bigger than yourself, right? Then if you're a person who knows that you're not going to be a visionary entrepreneur, you don't like managing others, you don't want to be a boss, you don't want to, set budgets and worry about all kinds of CEO sort of stuff, but you think, man, there's this business, they're obviously contributing to the world in the most amazing way. I'm just going to figure out how that I can work for them, right? I can be that B person who supports the visionary, or, you can be the person who supports the visionary, whatever your role is going to be in this little simplified model of the world. And if you think about that and you see how you can extrovert and think more about a project that's external to yourself, you're probably going to be much, much better off and have all the things that you want and need. And you won't even have time to sit around being selfish, farting around with the law of attraction for cars and swimming pools and airplane rides and all this kind of stuff. You'll get it anyway, despite yourself, if you are contributing at the highest possible level. So that's what I mean there by extrovert your visualization. Kyle is in the house. Thanks for being here, Kyle. You missed a lot of back and forth, some great discussion and wrestling over the topic of visualization and the so-called law of attraction. Glad that you're here. Really appreciate seeing you all the time. Brad says, I have been given that truth serum stuff. I think it's the same stuff Michael Jackson died from. It was a controlled setting and my subconscious was programmed. I can't even explain how perception changed instantly. That's a very interesting experience. Thank you for sharing that. Peggy says, actions are what will lead to fulfillment of visualized goals. I suppose that an idea initially comes as an attractive wish, and then if the goal is magnetic enough and it sticks, it will lead to action. Yeah, I think there's a lot to that. Stephen King talks about, how so many of his ideas, they have to be around for a long time. And it's the ideas that keep coming back that ultimately get written. I don't know if that's universally true of all his books, but it's an interesting concept. And I find myself that I have many ideas that just won't go away, and they won't go away until that I actually put them into action. So that's quite interesting. So now let's link this to memory, right? If you want to have a better memory, instead of these recordings and a lot of the trainings where they're like, oh, well, just imagine yourself reading so quickly and imagine yourself remembering everything, which is very, very unlikely to work. I'm not saying it can't work. I haven't seen any evidence of it. But instead of all that jazz, if you want a better memory, have a goal that actually serves or at least connects with others. Learning a language is a great one because then you are able to connect with more people. Then, make that goal a series of mini goals, little missions that are actually going to get you more fluent each and every time that you commit something to memory and you speak, write, read, and listen. And then set a practice and study regime and stick with the plan. And above all, be scientific about your memory. Track and analyze and manage the challenge frustration curve so that you can optimize things over time. So one of the things that will happen when you're working and you're memorizing is that you're going to hit plateaus, right? And often you get so good with the techniques that, you're not really challenged anymore, so it gets boring to you. So what you need to do is just raise the challenge a little bit, but not so much that you get frustrated and give up, right? And if you can manage that challenge frustration curve over time, you can optimize. And the best way to optimize is to track. And so one of the things that you can do to track is just a simple notebook. I've been lately tracking now with something called a Snapshot Journal, which is a really amazing thing because it lets you compare 5 years at a glance. Now, I'm still in year 1, but over the years, when I get around to where I started, then I'll be able to see where I was at last year. And so that's quite something to be able to do. And you optimize over time because you're being analytical. You're observing. You're seeing where you're getting stuck. And you don't need mindset or anything like that. What you need to do is actually just be scientifically disinterested. Have discernment over what's going on. And really, really allow yourself and enable yourself to be an observer of what's going on without having an emotional reaction to it or an emotional attachment to it, but just seeing, how can I optimize this? How can I make it better? What am I doing that could be a bit better? What am I doing that is sabotaging my success? And the more that you do that, the more you're going to have a great journey. It's never going to get boring, and you're never going to get stiff, and just change things from time to time. So one of the things I'm changing now is this idea of having my Memory Palace drawings on index cards instead of inside of memory journals, seeing how that's going. So if Carolyn checks this out later, this is Zamalek. I haven't sent you a picture yet, but in any case, it's just kind of a new thing. It's a challenge. It keeps it fresh. It's the same old thing, but it's a challenge. And from time to time, I like to have little drawings to think about different things. Creative visualization. It's both in my head and here, and it gets memorized quite quickly by combining the magnetic memory method with an actual externalization of the memory palace, and having that memory palace be able to do recall rehearsal in a different way. So always challenge, but never frustrate. Never frustrate. Very, very important. All right. So Brunheimer says, to be objective, law of action is not a law either, but I'm messing with you. Well, you're right. It's not a law, but I'm messing with the law of attraction, and you're messing with me, and I appreciate it. I love that. Thank you for that. I'm not sure I would call it a principle either, but if we're going to use the language of laws, I would certainly put the law of action far ahead of anything out there. And just understand that attraction comes after action, not before. I can't think of a single example where that would be the case, where it came before. All right, so I had a question that I skipped over, and I want to make sure that was from Draven1. Thank you for that. Don't want to miss that. But before we go, here's the thing. If you're going to visualize, if you're in the Magnetic Memory Method Masterclass, you have access to the meditation, the guided meditation walkthroughs. And so you can use guided meditations that get you to produce the desired outcome. So instead of visualizing and fantasizing and dreaming about the desired outcome, this actually takes you through the magnetic modes and a memory palace that you create with a little bit of guidance in doing so in a relaxed way. And it's meant to propel you to action. I hear from all kinds of people that they absolutely love this recording. So if you already have the masterclass, that's there. It's in the master plan segment of the training. And if you don't, then look for it when you're in there, because it's helping a lot of people. And I know why it's helping them. It's helping them because it gets you to produce the outcome by actually thinking through the steps in a relaxed state, not necessarily visualizing them, but actually doing them as you think about them in part. And then you translate that to the actual activity of memorizing information. All right. So that's there for you. And I want you to understand, I'm not opposed to listening to recordings that can help you, but we don't want to be sitting there dreaming and fantasizing. We want to put things into action. And so I figured out a way to create recordings that actually get you to do the actions that you're going to do in a relaxed manner, because that's the only thing that ever does anything. The only thing that's going to attract better memory to you is the action of training and focusing on your memory using the tools that are scientifically demonstrated to be true, and then being the scientist who runs the experiments in the laboratory of your own mind. And that's the most exciting thing to do. You can come up with your own metaphor. You don't have to be a scientist in a laboratory. You can be a gardener in a garden. I know sometimes I ask for metaphors, and I'll never forget the guy who said, well, my memory is like a graveyard because that's where memories go to die. Well, that's a very sad, sad situation. Your brain is like a garden that really grows if you will just dive in and grow it. So you got to nurture it. And the challenge frustration curve is there to have as a mental model that will help make sure it never gets so easy as boring, and help make sure you never get so frustrated that you stop and give up. All right. So let's answer Draven1's question here. It says, how can I use a memory palace to remember math equations? Great. So what you're going to want to do is have memory palaces, ideally multiple memory palaces. Then what you're going to do is you're going to learn the major method using a memory palace. Once you know the major, you're going to use that to encode numbers. Then you're going to want images for symbols and stuff like that. And then you're going to memorize them, and then you're going to use recall rehearsal to get it into long-term memory. And thank you for that question. Really appreciate it. Brunheimer says, I personally loved your guided meditation. I never have been able to visualize things with such clarity before. Awesome. Well, thumbs up to that. I'm really glad that helped you. And I'm glad to hear another person giving feedback from that, because I've had a lot by email. But I appreciate you saying that here. And you're saying it really helped me to gain some control of my imaginative constructs. Amazing, amazing. Well, yeah. That's what it's for. And I assume, but you could correct me, but I assume that it's because you're actually taking the actions as you were listening to those recordings. Also, Brunheimer, I'd be very interested. I ask a lot of people, they say, would you create some more? And I kind of just think, well, it feels kind of complete to me, the series, but what if you had any ideas of what guided meditation memory palace walkthroughs I might create, let me know, and I can put it in the percolator and maybe something can come up. And here again is this example back to the Einstein thing that I reacted to there is it's never anybody's idea. It's always the assemblage of multiple people. So it's very, very important to collaborate. All things are collaboration and assemblage. All right, let's check in with the chat here. Akash, thanks for being here, Akash. Good to see you. How many maximum stations should we build for one subject? For example, geography has a lot of terminology, like more than 2,000. Should we build a memory palace with 2,000 stations? Does it need to be that big? No, this is a common misconception about memory palaces. First of all, don't turn it into a numbers game, even though there's room for turning it into a numbers game, and there's value in doing it. Learn the techniques first. Just learn how to memorize 10 of those things. 10, right? If you really, really want to memorize 2,000 words, you don't need 2,000 stations in 100 memory palaces or whatever that number would work out to. What you do need to do, though, is you need to be able to memorize 10 words first in one memory palace. And if you can do that, then you can go on and memorize all kinds of things. Then once you can do it, then you figure out the math. You think about how you could add on new terms to the existing terms that you've memorized where it makes sense to do so. And often it will. I can't tell you in advance where it would make sense to do so because I'm not studying geography. But certainly in the Sanskrit studies and the Chinese studies that I'm doing, there's a lot of little opportunities to do what I call compounding and to add things on. So it's almost always that way. I cannot predict in advance how many memory palaces you would need, but don't turn it into a numbers game ahead of the game. If you're not there yet, there's no point in doing that math. You just need to get started. You'll feel such an amazing accomplishment when you have your first 10 words. You'll be like, I get it. I'm going for this. And you'll just start to figure it out. And you go back and you get more training if you need it. But really, it's just getting started and not overthinking it. So I hope that helps you out, Akash. And I appreciate the question. Kyle says, do you like anything about studying with technology? And if so, what do you like? Or do you just use pen and paper? Great question, Kyle. Do I like anything about studying with technology? Well, sure. I like the fact that you can find all kinds of things on the internet to learn. And I like that there's things that we would never know about from each other. Like, for example, an episode of what was called Black Mirror came up today. Right? I've never know to look for that. Right? A festival came up today. I'd never know about these things. So the technology makes it possible for us to do it en masse in a way that is just completely missing from our lives if we don't have this technology. So I like that. I like that I can learn about how to teach better. That's a learning thing. everything you're seeing on the screen now is experimentation, learning a little bit about information display. If you have any suggestions, I'm more than open to trying them, thinking things through. I like that about it. I like that, for example, with WeChat, I can talk to my father-in-law pretty much every day. We chat back and forth and talk about all kinds of things, and he's really interesting because then it's like authentic Beijing Chinese, right? That's really awesome. Doesn't necessarily help with 23 provinces I think that Chinese has, and then multiple dialects and so forth. But at least my goal is just to jam with him, and so we do every day. I love that about the technology. But yes, I use pen and paper. I capture what it is we're talking about. I actually transcribe. No, I won't always do everything because sometimes he'll say a lot of stuff, but let's call it like between 50 to 80%. I will transcribe what it is that he's saying there and work out in my mind what it is that he's saying. When I don't know vocabulary, I'll figure out what those words are, add them in. It's way faster than sitting there with some sort of app and typing and all that stuff. What I can do within seconds on paper would take so long with these tiny little buttons. Oh man, it's absolutely aggravating, those tiny little buttons. So I use pen and paper for that. And then, something might come up, some vocabulary word that I don't know, and I can make a magnetic image of it and know what the tones are and so forth. And more, I'm starting to experiment with this, and that comes from our daily conversations. It's really fun. So, and let's be clear, Kyle. This is technology. This is technology, right here. It's just. I was surprised. I was looking here. I was like, oh yeah, right. I put my magnetic imagery on the back here. So nowhere here does it tell me how this word is supposed to be pronounced, right? It just has the actual sort of like the image in my mind, and then it has a description of the magnetic imagery here. This is technology, and it's much, much faster to use than it is to do all that in an app. Now, maybe there's some cats out there who are really, really much faster with the apps than I am, and power to them. You don't have to have my dislike of apps be the thing that influences you. Find your own way. I don't want to waste the time. It takes too long. But I appreciate the question. And I'm sure there's more things that I like about technology. I mean, I like YouTube. I love to learn from YouTube. Basically, it's like an audiobook in a way, listening to all these wonderful discussions that people have. I have a distaste for short videos, though, although sometimes the short videos are good. And I don't like the snippetization of things and some of the corporate influence. But other than that, it's just absolutely fantastic. And look what we're able to do now. Maricella says, thanks for the visualization of the love of the attraction linked to the memory. Okay, excellent. Brunheimer says, we went through this. Brad says, Anthony, I'm visualizing you becoming rich and famous. I got you. Well, thanks for that, Brad. Brunheimer says, back to the to the MP3s, usually get more conceptual. But yes, it's repetition that made the difference. Awesome. So yeah, I'm really, really glad that that you use them multiple times, because that's what helps. And then the idea is you just go on autopilot after that. So thanks for that feedback. Brunheimer says, actually, I may have an idea for you to make a new meditation. Just let me know where and when you would like me to talk about it. Okay, great. Well, let's start maybe with email, and that'd be awesome. I'd love to explore ways to build that out and add some more to it. Thank you. Ben says, I'm still interested in a guided memory palace self-inquiry meditation, or a guided memory palace meditation that deals with strong emotions. Okay. Yeah. I have to think more about that and think about emotions. I'm very much a kind of lacking in certain areas because I don't necessarily experience strong emotions other than other than, some good ones lately. Dealing with anger, I don't know. Like it'd be a bit inauthentic for me to create a guided memory palace meditation for that. So almost the better thing would be to find someone who's dealt with anger and then try to, Tim Dalgley's research there with Method of Loci for depression, maybe guided by that, fuse some of his ideas together with mine, and then see if we can help a person who has elected to allow us to, experiment and so forth. Because anger, well, if I think about it, maybe I can tap into more anger from my past, but then it would still be a problem because I'm not angry about it anymore, right? So how could I deal with it? Certainly we can pluck around with ideas for that. Thanks for that suggestion. It's a very compelling one. I'm not sure it's my area to go around. And also, Ben, my ultimate suggestion would be that that's already anyway what the Ribhu Gita is. So for me to guide someone through memorizing the Ribhu Gita, that's what's in the book. Whether or not people are going to, like, I make it very clear in the book, my magnetic imagery is not going to be something that's necessary. Like, hey, by all means, if my magnetic imagery works for you, go ahead and use it. I'm not precious about it. But it's very, very unlikely to do so, especially because some of the references are so incredibly obscure. And if they're not obscure, they're very dated to my mental imagery, right? So I do not expect a whole lot of people to jam with Chet from Hardy Boys. And we also don't want to create a situation where they're spending a bunch of time, where anyone is spending a bunch of time getting a familiar with the magnetic imagery of somebody else. Like, you could go and find the Hardy Boys. I don't know if the Hardy Boys series had Chet or not, because I never watched any of the episodes. But you can go and read a couple of Hardy Boy novels so that you get Chet in your mind. But wouldn't it be better to just understand the underlying principles behind why that I chose Chet, and then figure out what else it could be for you? Like, if you're a horror movie fan, you might use Chud instead, which is, again, another obscure references. Maybe you know someone named Chad, which is much more likely, and so on, right? But you need to understand the underlying principles, why that even if it's a name that ends with a D, you could still get to your goal of Chit, right? So this is a practice and a science in which it's very much like Gary Weber talks about as teaching, needing de facto in matters of the mind to be teaching by abandonment in some sense. So the guided meditations that I've done, I'm very, very excited that they work for people, but it still has that characteristic of teaching by abandonment, and they needed to be designed in such a way that it got the people to produce the desired outcome for themselves. In the case of using self-inquiry and memorization for the goal that you're looking for, I think that if you just memorize those Ribhu Gita passages, what they mean, you're already going to get there. And how to actually guide people through it, we would have to do it in English, I guess. But yeah, thank you for the suggestion. It adds into the percolator, and then it ultimately pops out in something. More and more, I feel like a conduit for all of these things, which is part of what will happen to anybody who extroverts their visualization and their outcomes. And I got to thank Tony Buzan actually for this, because I don't have it here. But one of the things that we did when we were together was to make a mind map for the magnetic memory method trajectory. And that was an absolutely beautiful thing. And I had never thought of using mind maps in that way. So that is really, really important. That was revealed as a potential use of mind maps, because it's really helped chart a better course ever since. And in the memory connection, there's an image, I believe, if memory serves, of that mind map that I created it, but at his suggestion. So that was cool. All right. Brad says, I'm one of those people fighting against the need for memory palaces. Okay, Brad, tell us more about what that fight looks like and why that you feel the need to fight against it. What's happening? Let us know in the chat. And if you're just joining us, hit the thumbs up. Let me know where you are in the world, what you're doing, what you're thinking. And to follow on Benjamin's suggestion, let us know if you have anger issues or emotional issues. That'd be interesting to know. Happy to help if possible. All right, let's see. So Brad says, I'm lazy. Okay. Why are you lazy? Do you have any insight, any self-reflection on why you're lazy? I'm not entirely sure that that it's possible for you to be a person who's fighting against the need for memory palaces if you're lazy. That doesn't sound like a thing that a lazy person does. Do lazy people fight? I know what you mean, but and I'm trying to be slightly humorous, but also very seriously ironic. How do those two things go together? Akash says, how many maximum stations should one build in his memory palace? Well, you really want to make the amount that's manageable so that you can actually do recall rehearsal in a meaningful and doable way. So I generally will cap out anything in the 20s. I used to do up to 50, but what I found is that I was doing so much inner segmentation for recall rehearsal that it just became better to do them smaller. The exception would be something where it's like a set where, yeah, really a 50 makes sense. But rarely have I done any more than 50 stations. And even then, when you think about them, those 50 stations essentially break down to 3 memory palaces. Likewise, technically, my Ribhu Gita Sanskrit 32 verses, technically that's all in 1 memory palace, but segmentation-wise, it's really better said that it's in 3. So that's the answer to that. JunkTube 4000, thanks for being here. What's your thoughts on Anki? I don't really have thoughts about Anki other than that it's another spaced repetition tool, and I think that all of that stuff, if it works for you, I don't have any anything to say. But if it's not working for you, it's probably the relegation to machines and fantasizing that that's somehow going to help you. That's the problem, and you need to try other things. So those are my thoughts on that. It's obviously an incredible technological feat that they've created, but I really it's never anything that worked for me because it either requires too much upfront loading time, or it's just an annoyance to have a machine notify, oh, time to do this. Oh, really? Is it? Like I have this attitude. No. And then it just never ends up getting done. Far better is to actually have something self-created that you actually are excited about and that you really, really want, that's linked to your life, and not just this, oh, time to review, passive review. And one of the problems is that people don't actually actively interact with the information that they stuff in there, or they just download someone else's list, right? So they have no investment in its creation or involvement. Sometimes conveniences can help and so forth. I don't know. At the end of the day, what does my opinion of it matter? What matters more is it getting you a result? If it's getting you a result, what kind of result is it getting you? And are you happy with that? And if not, are you willing to explore alternatives? Because there are many, many more alternatives. And so basically that's that. Akash says, thank you. You're very welcome. And Brad says, figure out an easier way for us, please. An easier way about what, Brad? Look, the wish for things to be easier is really not the greatest wish, is it? Wouldn't you rather wish that you were just better rather than easy? There are just things in life that just aren't easy. They're never going to be easy. And the things that you think are hard might actually not be so hard if you would just dive in and do them and get it done and be a bit more reflective on why you've come to this conclusion. So I've sort of asked you why you're lazy. And you don't have to reflect publicly, but it'd be very, very interesting. Why are you lazy? Some of that reflection could go a long way. You could actually use a memory palace to do some of that reflection. So maybe this is getting to what Ben is interested in. Maybe not the emotion of anger, but the sensation of laziness. So here's just like an off-the-cuff exercise for you. Think of a memory where you've been lazy, right? I'll try and think of one for myself. Very hard though. I don't know why I'm built as I am, but rarely do I sit around doing nothing. If anything, I have the opposite problem of being a little bit more like the Energizer Bunny. Bang, 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 bang. What do I do next? What am I going to do? Oh, I'm already doing it. Oh, it's already done, etc. But when I've been lazy, I'll try and think about it. Yeah. No. I haven't really got an idea. But imagine then that you're lazy and you have to study for an exam. I don't know. I just loved studying for exams because I just before that I got depressed, I loved it, and during the depression, I didn't love it because I couldn't get anything. But it wasn't laziness, and I knew it wasn't laziness. It was brain fog and depression and side effects from medicine. But just for the sake of argument, I'll imagine I'm on the couch in that apartment and I was lazy. And I'm seeing myself there, and then I just start to pick around like, what are the components of the laziness? See, this doesn't work for me because the first image that comes up is all the movies that I had to watch. But why did I have to watch movies? Because I was doing film studies as part of my dissertation, and I had to watch a lot of movies. And one of my field exams was also on the history of film theory and literary theory. So I had to watch a lot of movies. So I wasn't really being lazy at all, sitting around watching movies. But for the sake of example, if I had a bunch of movies around that had nothing to do with my studies, I could think in this memory palace, well, I'm lazy because I preferred movies to the books, for example. And I'd poke around with that and try and think about my preference. Where did this possibly come from? And so forth. Another thing you could do is start to remember your dreams and write down your dreams and think about how your dreams are maybe having some kind of, not that dreams have meaning, but that they have some kind of catalyst for your thinking about yourself, your self-inquiry, so to speak. I did that a lot, and that was really, really helpful for thinking about how I interacted with the world. But again, not from the basis that dreams have any meaning, but rather, can I free associate with the dreams to give myself ideas that I wouldn't have otherwise? And that's a very powerful exercise. The guy to read on that is Robert Lange's, and the book is called Decoding Your Dreams. He has many, many fascinating books. That's one of them. I also was able to do therapy with him directly, so I got the book plus the actual sitting there in the room with him, and it was painful and uncomfortable, but I learned a lot. So that's one thing you could do. Anyway, I might think of a way to like make a sort of generic guided memory meditation for revisiting, using a memory palace to help you deal with something like laziness or anger or whatever, but I'm not quite sure. Anyway, there's a spontaneous attempt for you that probably leads nowhere, but give it a try, see what happens. And I would encourage you to do some Langesian dream analysis. It was very good for me anyway. Unfortunately, he's dead, so not able to recommend that you go with therapy with him, but otherwise I would say go get therapy with him. But you know what? There might be people teaching in his style, or not teaching in his style, but doing therapy in his style. You could look into that. All right. So Brad says, seriously though, you are right. I have spent 20 years floating these ideas and haven't gotten past the memory palace. I'm not lazy. I just haven't found a solution. Great. Well, have you taken the free course? If not, go to magneticmarymethod.com/YT, hook you up, and then you're able to explore a solution that might get you to take action and actually see the memory palace in a different way than maybe you've seen before. And get more involved in this community because we sometimes do group events. And we recently did one that broke the memory palace down into the smallest possible component that I could imagine, and it really helped a lot of people. And those are the kinds of things that you'll know about, especially if you're on my email list. Although in that case, I did announce it also on a YouTube live. So I hope that you can at least get started with the traditional course that's helped so many people at magneticmemorymethod.com/YT, as you see down on the screen there now. And I think you'll find it very useful. JunkTube 4000. I was having a hard time making a mnemonic for the word cherubim, which is an angel that looks part man, eagle, bull, and lion. I just couldn't relate anything to the sound of the word. Okay, JunkTube 4000. Is English your mother tongue or no? I can already see a cherry, the YouTube signal, and maybe a garbage bin. Now, BIM is not bin, but that's where I would go with to remember the M. It would maybe be a McDonald's garbage bin. So, and you know what? Like, I got the cherry initial idea, but I think, what was it? Warrant? She's my cherry pie. I never learned the lyrics of that song. But now it's a real cherry, right? At least it's a phonic, conceptual cherry. And the YouTube symbol was already there. The bin in front of the McDonald's is already more of a specific one, but which McDonald's, right? Push it, make it more specific. And, of course, you could have this angel that is part man, eagle, bull, and lion eating from the garbage bin there. Easy peasy lemon squeezy. This should just take seconds. How do you get there? Practice, my friend. And break it down. The principle of word division would see this as 3 syllables and work it out. Cherry, YouTube, logo, bin. It's just that easy. So Akash, Brunheimer says, Akash, just start to do a little bit of it every day. I did not even start with doing Memory Palace. First, I read books about it. In each of them were examples that I've learned. Yeah, start. That's the number one thing. Brunheimer says, for me, it's only when I started the Magnetic Memory Method Masterclass that I really made a difference in the effectiveness of my memory palaces. Great to hear that. Great to hear that. Brad says, decoding your dreams. Well, listen, thank you. I'm paying attention. Awesome. That's great, Brad. I think you'll find that book amazing if you put it into action. It's not just an idea. And it's very, very important to understand he's not talking about dreams having meaning. He's talking about using them to free associate, to better understand how you interact with the world. It's a very key difference. I wouldn't recommend it if it was this la-di-da, oh, well, look, we've got these airy-fairy meanings of dreams. No, that's just fantasy. You've got to see how you're using them as a catalyst for self-psychotherapy through a very personal form of free association from your own material, which is very enhanced material that would be elicited from you in a traditional psychotherapeutic setting. So Brad says, just got involved on the list, way overdue. Thank you. Well, thank you, Brad, for giving it a try. And, get involved with the community and ask questions, and you'll succeed if you just keep showing up to the game. JunkTube says, wow, thanks. You're very welcome, JunkTube. I hope that helps you. But, see the principle underneath it, not the example, because that example may not work for you. Maricella says, I have long lists to do. I cannot have the luxury to be lazy. If I take a nap or meditate, it's because my body and mind require it. Great. Well, that's another thing. When one is punishing oneself for being lazy, think about it. How on earth do I have the ability to be lazy? Be grateful that you actually can get away with it. Or can you? Is it that you're not getting away with it? But in many, many cases, people are punishing themselves for being lazy when actually it's a blessing that they can take it easy. Maybe what they need to do is relax a little bit, enjoy it. This is one of the things that Eckhart Tolle points out, Procrastination. Procrastination is in the world. It happens. Instead of sitting there punishing yourself about it, relax. And then from there, instead of being so self-critical about it, be a bit more grateful about the circumstances that have made it even possible for you to be that way. And if you want to make a change, then we've talked a lot today about some more practical ways to actually get change to work for you, which to rehearse is to actually set goals based on your existing competence that involve an extroverted vision for how you can contribute to humanity rather than what you're going to get out of it. That's very, very powerful. All right. So I'm going to take a quick look through the mailbag here. If you have any last questions or comments that you would like to type into the chat, please do so now, and we'll catch up with those. Otherwise, I'll see what's in the mailbag and see what we can do for you. So pop in any last comments or questions now, and we'll discuss those, and I'll read Jose's email here. Jose writes, I'm interested in languages, and it includes Chinese. And how? Does your system work with Chinese? It is a tonal language, and that means it's not just the word that is important, but also the accent. The tone of it, there are 4 tones plus a neutral one. Not possible to describe in a few words here, but this means that you have to learn a word with the right tone. Second, the Chinese character. It is a complicated system of drawing. Can your system help with that? Well, Jose, thank you very much for these questions, and good luck, because I study Chinese myself. And here's the deal. Yes, but it's not a system. The magnetic memory method is a method, and that method is very much about taking the principles and the underlying laws, shall we say, that govern the rules of your memory and helping you optimize the process by making sure that you know how to use memory palaces correctly, that you know how to set goals that are meaningful and actually use elaborative encoding so that the information doesn't matter. Now, with respect to Chinese in particular, the tones are known through an application of the major method to the words. So, for example, I know that Junbei is 3 and 4. And I know that because there's a horse involved in that image, right? Yun Dong, which I just showed you here, is 4-4, I believe. Where's the card for that? Yeah. So Yun Dong, and it means exercise, right? And I know this because the image is the YouTube symbol being basically thrown at the UN, and Donkey Kong is exercising with a donkey. So that really helps the dong part. And then I have here 44, just shorthand, but in my mind, I have a RAR file that is also basically involved in here in a way that's very rude, and I won't share that. But that's all that. Now, in terms of characters, there's the can't miss formula in the FAQ section of the masterclass, which shows you a process for memorizing the characters as well. When I basically am just, I did some characters just to see if I could memorize them, but I'm not all that interested yet in memorizing characters because basically I want a 5,000 word vocabulary or thereabout before I even bother with the characters. And there's a reason why. It's because, first of all, it's just not that interesting to me, but I did get to be able to memorize about 1 every 5 minutes reliably with a 24-hour and a 48-hour recall rate of around 98% success. And the can't miss formula is very, very streamlined to do that. To be fair, I didn't experiment with it enough, but enough to basically be able to teach it to others if they wanted to focus on characters. And how it works is, well, you're going to bring together a lot of stuff, and you're going to need to have a solid memory palace practice. You're going to need to be very good with encoding, and that's a good news because that training is in the masterclass, which is designed to be able to get you there. So that's basically how that works. And obviously, to be able to create an image for all the tone combinations, you're going to need the major. And so, yeah, it'll all work for that, Jose. Thank you for asking. And I'll email him as well with this information. But it's very, very fun and simple to do. It makes Chinese a lot easier, and I like it. Brad says, what are your memory achievement that you're most proud of? Well, I'm just proud to be here today because these techniques saved my life. I was going to quit school and possibly do a lot worse. And I'm very proud that I was able to figure these techniques out, because it wasn't immediately clear to me how it was all going to work, but I persisted. So I'm very, very proud of that. And I'm not really proud of it, but when I did my final defense of my dissertation, I was so clear and focused, and one person in particular really wanted me to fail and tried to make me fail, and they actually debated afterwards. But I prevailed, and one of the reasons why I prevailed is because my performance in the defense itself showed this absolute clarity of what I knew to the page number. And there's just something about that precision that saved the day. So I'm not proud to have been in a room where someone tried to tear me down, but that's what these exams are, right? They're trying to protect the ivory tower. They don't want to give that degree away to just anybody. But part of what saved the day was the fact that, no, this guy knows his stuff. You might not agree that he has the right conclusion, but he's very, very, whatever they said there. I actually wasn't there when they were doing this. My Dr. Fotter told me later, or my dissertation supervisor, and I didn't remember every last detail about what he said. But nonetheless, it came down to the fact that I wasn't just talking about stuff, but I actually knew it, and I knew it very deeply and intimately, and with reference that was specific and precise. And in one instance to the page number, which was 72, by the way. But I wouldn't really call it pride. It was a weird moment. It was just the tools doing what the tools do, and it's obviously much more comprehensive because writing is involved, and et cetera, et cetera. And then otherwise, I'm just proud and honored to be able to meet with cool people like yourself who ask great questions and debate a little from time to time, as we did today, and just have a general wonderful series of outcomes that this work has helped to create. So I'm very, very proud of the testimonials page, for example, at magneticmarymethod.com/testimonials, which I never have enough time to keep updated, but it's just an incredible series of stories that really show what happens when people take knowledge and apply it. And so it's about them. I'm very proud of them, and I'm proud to know those people. And I'll share with you that link here in the chat so you can check it out for yourself. But really, they take the credit because they put it into action. And there we go. That should work for you. And I really, really enjoy seeing what people do and all of the different ways that they do it for the different outcomes that they do it for. It's just one of the most amazing things. But I'm proud for them, and I'm proud to be part of it. All right. Brunheimer is leaving the Memory Palace. Thanks for being here, Brunheimer. Always good to see you. Great back and forth today. Look forward to getting that coffee. Oh, right. So, let's see here. Where were we at? So Jennifer says this is a very good conversation. I like it. Thank you, Jennifer. Thank you for being here. Thanks for letting me know. Helen says, amazing. Thank you for putting this out. You're very, very welcome. Akash says, can we put our mistakes in Memory Palace so that we won't do it again? I never thought about that. I don't see why you couldn't. Not sure that would be the strategy that I would take, but sure, why not? Give it a try. See, back to Ben's thing about, emotions and so forth. I don't know I would want to encode the emotions around there, but maybe what you would want to do is, this is probably the better idea, the good idea, is encode in there your solution. So you made a mistake, but rather than memorize your mistake so you don't do it again, memorize the solution so you remember to use the solution. I think that's a much more powerful situation. Jennifer says, hoping to catch this interesting matter after 2 hours as I'm off to work. Great, Jennifer. Really appreciate you being here. And all right, so I think that's all for mailbag today, but I really appreciate that question from Jose about Chinese, and I appreciate everything that everybody contributed today. It was wonderful, wonderful, great meeting. Thank you, Maricela, for being here as always, and thank you, Akash. Really great, and thank you for all the people who made this active and interesting, and it was a lot of fun. Happy to serve, and look forward to seeing you on a future live stream. Let me know if you haven't completed the survey on the YouTube community tab. Please do add your voice, add your suggestions for future live streams. This was a bit of an unusual one for sure, but I think pseudoscience is just as important as other forms of science, and I hope to continue to make it more clear what we mean when we're talking about science, so that we can culminate a picture together of more elevated uses of that term. And then, of course, just to recap, it's not really so much that there isn't some good stuff in the law of attraction. It's just so much of it is buried in really things that appeal to the snappy, instant results base level of all of us, right? And it is attractive to a lot of us precisely because it makes the appeal to our desire and our wish and our need for instant on results. But that's just not reality. It's not reality. And the fact of the matter is that nothing happens until action takes place. And so you can attract all of the things that you want and need in life simply by taking action first. And I hope to have been capable of demonstrating its importance simply by taking action today. And you helped it be possible. And so I hope that you will go out, get some memory training, and allow yourself to enjoy the outcomes that come from a better memory, because memory is what you are. And the more you are able to interact with it and use it to create outcomes, the more you'll just realize that this is all memory. It's all memory. Or is it Memorex? In any case, I really appreciate everybody being here today. And until we have a chance to speak again, come visit me at magneticmarymethod.com and keep yourself magnetic. Bye-bye.